There exists a truth so powerful that most people spend their entire lives never discovering it, and those who do often stumble upon it by accident rather than intention. What if everything you've been taught about money, success, and prosperity has been built on a foundation of misunderstanding? What if the answers you've been searching for aren't hidden in some exclusive seminar or locked behind the doors of elite institutions, but have been sitting openly in the pages of an ancient book that billions claim to revere yet few truly study with the lens of practical application? This isn't about religion as you know it, and it isn't about motivational platitudes that sound good, but deliver nothing. This is about uncovering a system, a framework, a blueprint that has existed for millennia and has been quietly used by some of the most financially successful individuals who ever walked this earth. The question isn't whether these principles work, because history has already proven they do. The question is whether you're ready to set aside everything you think you know and approach wealth from an entirely different perspective, one that aligns your spiritual foundation with your financial reality in ways that will feel both foreign and deeply familiar at the same time. Most people live their entire existence trapped in a cycle they don't understand, working harder and harder, yet never quite reaching the level of abundance they dream about in their quietest moments. They watch others seemingly glide into prosperity while they struggle, and they convince themselves that luck, privilege, or some invisible force beyond their control determines who gets to live abundantly and who doesn't. But what if I told you that this belief itself is the very prison keeping you locked in financial mediocrity? What if the real secret isn't about working harder or finding the right opportunity, but about fundamentally transforming the way your mind processes the concept of wealth itself? The Bible, that ancient text that sits on countless shelves collecting dust, contains within its pages a complete system for creating abundance that predates every modern financial strategy by thousands of years. Napoleon Hill, who spent over 2 decades studying the wealthiest and most successful people of his generation, discovered something remarkable in his research. He found that whether these individuals realized it consciously or not, they were operating according to principles that had been laid out in Scripture long before any of them were born. These weren't coincidences or happy accidents. These were universal laws being applied consistently, and the results were undeniable. When you open the Bible with fresh eyes, not as a religious text alone, but as a manual for understanding how prosperity actually functions in this universe, you begin to see patterns that change everything. Proverbs chapter 23 verse 7 tells us something profound when it says that as a person thinks in their heart, so they become. This isn't poetry meant to inspire warm feelings during a Sunday service. This is a mechanical description of how human consciousness interfaces with physical reality. Your thoughts aren't just passive observations of the world around you. They're active forces that shape, mold, and create the circumstances you experience. Every single thing you see in your life right now, from your bank account balance to your relationships to your health, exists as a direct reflection of the dominant thoughts you've been holding in your mind for months and years. If you want to know what you've been thinking about most consistently, don't listen to what you say. Look at what you have. Your external world is a perfect mirror of your internal world, and until you accept this truth completely, you'll continue believing that your circumstances control you, rather than understanding that you control your circumstances through the power of your sustained mental focus. Napoleon Hill called this principle applied faith, and he demonstrated through hundreds of case studies that every person who achieved extraordinary financial success did so by first achieving extraordinary mental clarity about what they wanted and why they wanted it. They didn't hope for wealth, they didn't wish for prosperity. They decided with absolute certainty that abundance was their birthright, and then they aligned every thought, every action, every decision with that inner knowing until the external world had no choice but to conform to their vision. This is where most people fail before they even begin. They approach wealth with doubt, with hesitation, with a mental framework that says, maybe I can succeed, maybe I'm worthy, maybe if things go right, I'll get what I want. But the universe doesn't respond to maybe. It responds to certainty. It responds to unwavering faith backed by consistent action. And the Bible makes this clear in passage after passage, from the teachings of Christ telling his followers that according to their faith would it be done unto them, to the book of James explaining that a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways and should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. The tragedy is that most people have been programmed from childhood to think small, to accept limitation, to believe that wanting more is somehow greedy or spiritually inappropriate. Churches teach that poverty is noble, while the Bible itself says that the love of money is the root of evil, not money itself. There's a massive difference between those two statements, yet one has been twisted into the other so effectively that millions of people unconsciously sabotage their own financial growth because they believe that being broke is somehow more righteous than being prosperous. But when you actually study the lives of the people God blessed in Scripture, you find story after story of individuals who walked in divine favor and accumulated tremendous wealth. Abraham was incredibly rich in livestock, silver and gold. Solomon's wealth was so vast that silver was considered as common as stones in Jerusalem during his reign. Job was restored to twice the prosperity he had before his trials. David established a kingdom and accumulated resources that funded the building of the most magnificent temple the ancient world had ever seen. These weren't accidents, these weren't exceptions. These were demonstrations of what happens when someone aligns themselves with divine principles of increase and operates according to spiritual laws that govern prosperity. Napoleon Hill discovered these same laws operating in the lives of Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and every other titan of industry he studied. He found that successful people think differently than unsuccessful people, not because they're more intelligent or more talented, but because they've learned, either through teaching or through trial and error, to cooperate with natural laws rather than resist them. They understand that thoughts are things, that desire backed by faith and persistent action becomes reality, and that the universe operates according to principles that don't change based on who you are or where you come from. These principles work for anyone who applies them correctly, just as gravity works for everyone, regardless of whether they believe in it or understand it. The difference is that most people never learn these principles in the first place, and even those who encounter them often dismiss them as too simple, too spiritual, or too good to be true. They keep searching for complexity when the answer has always been profoundly simple. Change your thinking, change your life, plant different seeds in your mind, harvest different results in your world, align yourself with abundance rather than scarcity, and watch how quickly your circumstances begin to shift in ways that will seem miraculous to those who don't understand what's actually happening. Your mind is the most powerful creative tool you'll ever possess, yet most people use it like a broken shovel, digging themselves deeper into the very hole they're trying to escape. Every single thought you think is either building your future or destroying it, and there's no neutral ground. You're either moving toward prosperity or away from it with every mental pattern you reinforce. The challenge is that most people don't realize they're reinforcing anything at all because their thoughts have become so automatic, so habitual, that they no longer notice what's running through their consciousness hour after hour, day after day. You wake up thinking the same thoughts you thought yesterday. You respond to situations with the same mental patterns you've always used. You see money through the same lens of limitation you inherited from parents who inherited it from their parents, and unless you consciously interrupt this cycle, you'll pass it on to your children exactly as it was passed to you. This is why Proverbs chapter 4 verse 23 instructs us to guard our hearts with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. Your heart, in biblical language, refers to your innermost being, your consciousness, the place where your core beliefs and dominant thoughts reside. Whatever you allow to take root, there will inevitably manifest in your external circumstances, which means that changing your life isn't primarily about changing your actions. It's about changing your mind first. Because right actions flow naturally from right thinking, while wrong thinking will sabotage even the best strategies and most sincere efforts. Napoleon Hill understood this principle so deeply that he dedicated multiple chapters in his work to the concept of autosuggestion, which is simply the practice of deliberately feeding your subconscious mind specific instructions rather than allowing it to absorb whatever random influences happen to cross your path. Your subconscious mind is incredibly powerful, but it cannot distinguish between truth and falsehood, between what's real and what's imagined, between what serves you and what destroys you. It simply accepts whatever you repeat to it most consistently, and then works tirelessly to make that mental image a physical reality. If you constantly tell yourself that you'll never have enough money, that rich people are corrupt, that you're not smart enough or connected enough or deserving enough to prosper, Your subconscious accepts those statements as commands and ensures that your behavior, your decisions, your perceptions, and even the opportunities you notice or ignore all align with making those statements true. This is why affirmations work when done correctly, and why they fail when treated as magical incantations rather than tools for reprogramming deep-seated beliefs. You can't just say positive words while your heart believes the opposite and expect results. You have to feel the truth of what you're declaring, visualize it with emotional intensity, repeat it until it sinks past your conscious resistance into the deeper layers of your being where real transformation happens. The Bible calls this renewing your mind, and Romans chapter 12 verse 2 explains that transformation comes through the renewing of your mind so that you can prove what is good and acceptable and perfect. This isn't religious jargon. This is practical psychology wrapped in spiritual language. When you renew your mind, when you replace old patterns of scarcity thinking with new patterns of abundance thinking, you literally change who you are at a fundamental level, and when you change who you are, you automatically change what you do, and therefore what you have. Most people try to change their circumstances while keeping their identity the same, and they wonder why nothing ever really shifts. They work harder at the same job with the same mindset and expect different results. They start new ventures with the same fears and limiting beliefs that killed their last 3 attempts. They make more money, but spend it the same way and end up broke again within months. The problem isn't the circumstances. The problem is the person navigating those circumstances, and until that person transforms internally, external changes will always be temporary and superficial. This is where the practice of daily mental discipline becomes non-negotiable for anyone serious about building lasting wealth. You must guard what enters your mind as carefully as you'd guard what enters your body if you were training for an athletic competition. Would you eat garbage food and expect to perform at championship levels? Of course not. Yet people consume mental garbage all day long through negative news, toxic conversations, fear-based media, and limiting beliefs disguised as practical wisdom, and then they wonder why their financial lives look like disaster zones. Proverbs 13 verse 20 warns that whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. This applies to your mental diet just as much as to your physical relationships. Who are you learning from? What voices are you allowing to influence your thinking? Are you spending time with people who talk about solutions, growth, and possibility, or with people who complain, blame, and make excuses? Are you reading books that expand your vision and challenge your limitations, or scrolling through content that reinforces every fear and insecurity you've ever had? The quality of your input determines the quality of your output, and if you want your life to produce different results, you must be ruthless about upgrading what you feed your consciousness every single day. Napoleon Hill discovered that every wealthy person he studied had formed the habit of continuous learning, not in formal education necessarily, though many valued that as well, but in the dedicated pursuit of knowledge that directly applied to their goals. They read biographies of successful people. They studied their industries deeply. They surrounded themselves with individuals who knew more than they did and weren't afraid to ask questions. They treated their minds as their most valuable asset and invested in that asset constantly, understanding that skills can be learned, strategies can be copied, and opportunities can be created, but only by someone whose mind is prepared to recognize and seize them when they appear. The average person sees obstacles where the trained mind sees stepping stones. The average person hears no where the prepared mind hears not yet. The average person gives up after the first failure, where the disciplined mind understands that failure is simply feedback showing you what doesn't work, so you can adjust and try again with better information. This mental flexibility, this refusal to accept defeat as permanent, this commitment to continuous growth regardless of temporary setbacks, this is what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who remain trapped in cycles of struggle and disappointment. Before we go any further, I want to pause for just a moment, because if what you're hearing right now is resonating with something deep inside you, if you feel like these words are speaking directly to where you are in your life right now, then I need you to do something for me. I need you to hit that subscribe button, not because I need the numbers, but because you need the reminder. When you subscribe, you're telling yourself that you're serious about this transformation, that you're not just passing through looking for entertainment, but that you're genuinely committed to changing the trajectory of your financial life. And after you subscribe, drop a comment below telling me what belief about money you're ready to let go of today. What's the one thought pattern that's been holding you back that you're deciding right now to release? Share it in the comments, because when you write it down, when you declare it publicly, you make a contract with yourself that's much harder to break than silent promises you make in your head. And if this message is hitting home for you, if you know someone else who needs to hear this truth, share this video with them. Don't keep this information to yourself when it could be the key that unlocks someone else's breakthrough. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is share knowledge that has the power to change lives, and this knowledge right here has that power if it's applied with faith and action. There's a principle woven throughout Scripture that appears again and again in different forms, yet most people read right past it without grasping its significance for their financial lives. It's the principle of sowing and reaping. And while everyone knows the basic concept that you harvest what you plant, very few understand how to apply this spiritually and practically to the creation of wealth. Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 states clearly that God is not mocked. For whatever a person sows, that will they also reap. This isn't a threat or a warning designed to scare people into good behavior. This is a description of how the universe actually functions, a spiritual law as reliable as the law of gravity or thermodynamics. When you plant corn, you don't get wheat. When you plant apple seeds, you don't get orange trees. And when you plant thoughts of poverty, limitation, and fear, you don't harvest abundance, opportunity, and prosperity. The harvest is always directly connected to the seed. And if you don't like what you're harvesting in your life right now, you need to examine what you've been planting in your mind and in your actions day after day for the past months and years. Napoleon Hill called this the law of compensation, and he observed that every wealthy person he studied understood intuitively that the way to receive more is to give more. Not give more money necessarily, though generosity is certainly part of it, but give more value, more service, more solutions to problems that affect other people. The individuals who accumulate the most wealth are not those who hoard and grab and take. They're those who create systems, products, services, and ideas that improve the lives of thousands or millions of people, and wealth flows to them as a natural consequence of the value they've delivered. Henry Ford didn't become rich by being greedy. He became rich by making automobiles affordable for the average working person, which transformed how millions of people lived and worked. Thomas Edison didn't accumulate wealth by exploitation. He accumulated it by solving the problem of reliable lighting, which changed civilization itself. Every fortune that lasts, every legacy of prosperity that endures beyond one generation, is built on a foundation of genuine value creation, not manipulation or trickery or exploitation of others. This is where most people completely miss the point about wealth creation. They think about what they can get rather than what they can give. They approach business with the mindset of extracting as much money as possible from customers, rather than serving customers so well that those customers become enthusiastic advocates. They focus on their own needs, their own desires, their own financial pressures, and they wonder why money seems to flow away from them rather than toward them. The reason is simple and spiritual. The universe, God, divine intelligence, whatever term you prefer, responds to your energetic frequency, and the frequency of taking is completely different from the frequency of giving. When you operate from a mindset of scarcity, trying to grab and hold and protect whatever little you have, you're literally broadcasting to the universe that you don't trust it to provide for you, that you don't believe there's enough to go around, that you're separate from the source of all abundance rather than connected to it, and the universe, being perfectly obedient to your faith or lack of it, gives you exactly what you believe. It confirms your scarcity by ensuring that scarcity is what you experience. But when you shift your entire approach to one of giving, of serving, of looking for ways to add value to every interaction and relationship, something miraculous begins to happen. Opportunities start appearing that weren't there before. People begin connecting you with resources and ideas and partnerships. Doors open that seemed permanently locked. Income streams develop from unexpected directions. And it's not magic, though it might look like that to outside observers. It's spiritual law in action, the same law that Jesus taught when he said in Luke chapter 6, verse 38, "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." The principle is clear. The measure you give is the measure you receive, not just in quantity, but in quality. If you give grudgingly with resentment, keeping careful score of who owes you what, you'll receive in that same spirit. But if you give generously, cheerfully, without keeping records or demanding immediate return, you'll receive in that spirit as well, multiplied beyond what you invested, because you've aligned yourself with the fundamental nature of abundance itself. Napoleon Hill documented this principle in the lives of steel magnate Charles Schwab, rubber industry pioneer Harvey Firestone, and countless others who understood that their primary job wasn't to chase money, but to create value and let money chase them. They focused on excellence in their work, on innovation that solved real problems, on building organizations that served customers exceptionally well, and wealth accumulated as a natural byproduct of those priorities. They didn't have to manipulate or scheme or compromise their integrity. They simply had to stay faithful to the principle of sowing value consistently, knowing that the harvest would come in due season if they didn't grow weary and give up too soon. This is where patience becomes essential, because seeds don't sprout overnight, and the time between planting and harvesting can test your faith severely if you're not grounded in understanding how the process actually works. Too many people plant seeds for a few days or weeks, see no immediate results, decide the whole thing is nonsense, and go back to their old patterns of struggle and complaint, never realizing that they quit right before their breakthrough was about to manifest. The book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, verse 1, offers unusual wisdom when it instructs to cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. This is agricultural language describing the ancient practice of sowing seed along riverbanks, where seasonal flooding would eventually bring a harvest. The key phrase is after many days, not immediately, not when you feel like you need it most, but in the perfect timing of natural cycles that don't conform to your convenience or impatience. If you want to experience harvest season in your finances, you must commit to planting season with consistency and faith, understanding that there will be a gap between the two, and that gap is where your character is tested, where your belief is proven, where you demonstrate whether you truly trust these principles or whether you were just experimenting with ideas until they got uncomfortable. The people who create lasting wealth are those who keep planting even when they can't see results yet, who keep serving even when it feels like nobody notices or appreciates it, who keep showing up day after day to do excellent work regardless of whether immediate rewards appear, because they understand that the universe is keeping perfect accounts and not a single seed sown in good faith ever fails to produce a return. One of the most misunderstood concepts in both spiritual and financial teaching is the role of discipline in creating prosperity. Most people think of discipline as unpleasant restriction, as denying yourself things you want, as forcing yourself to do difficult tasks through sheer willpower and gritted teeth. But that's not what discipline actually is, and it's certainly not how it functions in the lives of wealthy people. True discipline is the practice of choosing what you want most over what you want right now. It's the daily decision to align your actions with your long-term vision rather than your short-term impulses. It's the ability to delay gratification, not because you're punishing yourself, but because you're investing in a future that's far more valuable than any temporary pleasure you're postponing. And when you understand discipline this way, it stops being something you have to force and becomes something you choose gladly because you can see clearly where it's taking you. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 4 tells us that the soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. Notice the contrast here. Both people have desires. Both people want things. The difference isn't in what they want, but in what they're willing to do consistently to get it. The sluggard craves, wishes, hopes, dreams about success, while taking no meaningful action or taking action sporadically when motivation strikes, and then giving up when things get hard. The diligent person desires with equal intensity, but backs that desire with consistent effort, day after day, regardless of how they feel in the moment, regardless of whether they're seeing immediate results, regardless of what obstacles appear, and the outcome is completely different. One ends up with nothing despite all their wishing, while the other ends up fully satisfied, because they understood that satisfaction comes not from wanting, but from disciplined pursuit of what you want, backed by faith, that the universe will honor your efforts if you stay faithful to the process. Napoleon Hill spent considerable time analyzing what he called persistence, which he identified as one of the most critical factors separating successful people from failures. He found that almost everyone starts projects, sets goals, declares intentions, and feels motivated at the beginning of new ventures. But very few people maintain that energy past the first obstacles, the first failures, the first moments when things don't go according to plan. Most people quit when the path gets difficult, when results don't come as quickly as expected, when criticism or doubt or fear creeps in and starts whispering that maybe this won't work after all. They abandon ship at the first sign of storms, never realizing that storms are part of the journey and that the treasure they're seeking is always on the other side of the very obstacle that's tempting them to quit right now. The winners, the ones who actually build lasting wealth and success, are simply those who refuse to stop. Not because they were braver or more talented or luckier, but because they had disciplined themselves to keep moving forward regardless of circumstances, to treat obstacles as temporary inconveniences rather than permanent barriers, to see failure as information rather than identity. Think about the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused by his master's wife, thrown into prison for years, forgotten by people he'd helped who promised to remember him. By any reasonable measure, his life looked like one disaster after another, and he had every justification to become bitter, to give up, to decide that nothing he did mattered anyway. So why bother trying? But Joseph maintained his integrity, continued serving excellently wherever he was, kept trusting that God had a plan, even when circumstances suggested otherwise, and eventually all those seemingly tragic experiences positioned him to become second in command over all of Egypt and save multiple nations from famine. His discipline wasn't just in working hard, it was in refusing to let circumstances define his character or derail his faith in divine purpose. And that's the kind of discipline that creates breakthrough moments, the kind that transforms tragedy into triumph and obstacles into opportunities if you're patient enough and faithful enough to keep going when every logical reason says to quit. This requires developing what Napoleon Hill called a definite major purpose, a clear and specific goal that burns in your consciousness with such intensity that it pulls you forward even when everything else is pushing you backward. Most people don't have this. They have vague wishes. They'd like to be wealthy someday. They hope things work out. They're sort of pursuing success in a general direction without any concrete vision of exactly what they're building and why it matters so deeply to them that quitting is simply not an option. But the people who actually achieve extraordinary results have defined their purpose with precision, written it down, reviewed it daily, visualized it so clearly that it feels more real than their current circumstances, and committed themselves completely to its manifestation, regardless of how long it takes or what sacrifices are required. This kind of clarity creates unstoppable momentum because you're no longer subject to the whims of emotion or circumstance. You're anchored to something bigger than yourself, something that gives meaning to every challenge and transforms every setback into a setup for the next breakthrough. The Bible speaks to this in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2, where the prophet is instructed to write the vision down and make it plain so that whoever reads it may run with it. This isn't symbolic language. This is practical instruction for how to program your subconscious mind and activate the creative powers of the universe on your behalf. When you write your goals, when you make them clear and specific, when you review them so frequently that they become part of your identity, you set forces in motion that begin rearranging circumstances, attracting resources, and opening pathways that were invisible before you declared your intention. This is why successful people keep journals, maintain vision boards, write and rewrite their goals repeatedly, not because they're forgetful, but because they understand that clarity plus repetition equals manifestation. And the more clearly you can define what you want, and the more consistently you can hold that image in your consciousness, the faster physical reality will reorganize itself to match your mental reality. I want to pause here again because we've covered a lot of ground, and if you're still with me, that tells me something important about you. It tells me you're not just looking for quick fixes or magic formulas. You're willing to invest time and attention into understanding principles that actually work, even when they require you to change, to grow, to challenge beliefs you've held for years. And that's exactly the mindset that leads to breakthrough results. So before we continue, I want to ask you to do 3 things. First, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. Because subscribing is your way of telling yourself that you're serious about this journey and you want to be reminded of these principles regularly until they become automatic in your thinking. Second, leave a comment below sharing one specific goal you're committing to achieve within the next 12 months. Write it clearly, boldly, with confidence, because declaring your intention publicly gives it power and creates accountability that silent wishes never have. And third, share this video with someone you care about who's been struggling financially, someone who needs to hear that there's a better way, that they're not stuck, that transformation is possible if they're willing to apply these principles with faith and consistency. Your sharing might be the catalyst that changes their entire life, and what better gift could you give someone than knowledge that has the power to set them free from years of limitation? Fear is perhaps the single greatest destroyer of potential wealth, and yet it's the emotion most people spend the least time examining or addressing. Fear masquerades as practicality, as wisdom, as being realistic about your limitations, and in that disguise it kills more dreams, stops more action, and prevents more prosperity than any external obstacle ever could. The Bible addresses fear repeatedly, with 165 verses commanding us not to fear. Not because fear isn't real, or because bad things never happen, but because operating from fear guarantees that you'll never access the resources, opportunities, and divine favor available to those who move forward in faith. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 states explicitly that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. This tells us that fear doesn't come from the divine source of all provision. It comes from somewhere else, from the programming of your past, from the voices of limitation that surrounded you growing up, from your own imagination creating worst-case scenarios that will probably never happen. Napoleon Hill identified fear as one of the 6 ghosts that haunt humanity, with poverty being one of the most paralyzing fears of all. He found that people who fear poverty often create poverty through their fearful actions and decisions, not because the universe is punishing them, but because fear causes paralysis, poor judgment, missed opportunities, and self-sabotage. When you're afraid of losing money, you don't invest in opportunities that could multiply it. When you're afraid of failure, you don't take the calculated risks that lead to breakthrough success. When you're afraid of what others might think, you don't share the ideas or launch the projects that could serve thousands of people and generate substantial income. Your fear keeps you playing small, staying safe, choosing security over growth. And the tragic irony is that in trying to protect yourself from potential loss, you guarantee that you'll never experience significant gain. You trade the possibility of extraordinary success for the certainty of mediocre survival, and years later you look back with regret, wondering what might have been if you'd just been brave enough to try. But here's the truth about fear that most people never discover. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite fear. Every successful person you admire has felt the same fears you feel. They worry about failure. They question whether they're good enough. They feel the vulnerability of putting themselves and their ideas out into the world where they might be rejected or criticized. The difference is that they've trained themselves to acknowledge the fear, thank it for trying to keep them safe, and then do the thing anyway because they know that growth only happens outside the comfort zone, and that every moment spent hiding from fear is a moment stolen from their destiny. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 14 verses 28 through 31, Peter steps out of a boat and begins walking on water toward Jesus, something physically impossible by all natural laws, and he succeeds until he takes his eyes off Jesus and focuses on the wind and waves around him. The moment his focus shifts from faith to fear, he begins to sink. This is precisely how fear operates in your financial life. As long as you keep your eyes on your vision, your purpose, your faith in divine provision and natural laws of prosperity, you move forward successfully, even through circumstances that seem impossible. But the instant you shift focus to the obstacles, the doubts, the what-ifs, and worst-case scenarios, you begin to sink. The antidote to fear is not positive thinking alone, though that helps. The antidote is action, specifically action in the direction of what you fear. Because every time you do something that scares you and survive it, your brain recalibrates its threat assessment system and realizes that what you feared wasn't actually dangerous after all. This is how confidence is built, not through affirmations or wishful thinking, but through accumulated evidence that you're more capable than your fears suggested. You fear making that phone call, so you make it, and discover it wasn't as bad as you imagined. You fear launching that business, so you launch it and learn valuable lessons, even if it doesn't succeed immediately. You fear investing your money, so you start with a small amount and educate yourself until the fear transforms into informed confidence. Each small act of courage weakens fear's grip on your life and strengthens your capacity to take even bigger risks in pursuit of even greater rewards. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25 offers profound insight when it says, "The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe." The fear of man here refers to excessive concern with what other people think, which stops countless individuals from pursuing their true calling because it doesn't match what family, friends, or society expects from them. How many people stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid their parents will disapprove if they start a business? How many brilliant ideas never get shared because someone fears being laughed at or rejected? How many potential millionaires never emerge because they're so concerned with maintaining their current social circle's approval that they refuse to make the changes, connections, and investments necessary for growth? The irony is that the people whose opinions you're so afraid of are usually not living the lives you want to live anyway, which means their advice and judgment are based on their limitations, not your potential. If you want different results than the people around you are getting, you have to be willing to make different choices than they're making. And that will often require disappointing them, or confusing them, or having them question your sanity until your success makes your wisdom undeniable. Napoleon Hill found that one common trait among wealthy individuals was their willingness to make decisions quickly and change those decisions slowly, if at all. Poor people do the opposite. They take forever to make decisions because they're paralyzed by fear of making the wrong choice, and then they change their minds constantly based on other people's opinions or temporary obstacles. This indecisiveness guarantees failure because success requires commitment, persistence through difficulties, and the kind of unwavering focus that can only come from a decision so firm that reversing it isn't even a consideration. When you truly decide, not just wish or hope, but actually decide with every fiber of your being, the universe conspires to support that decision in ways that will seem miraculous. Resources appear. People show up with exactly what you need. Circumstances align in your favor, not because you're lucky or special, but because decisive commitment activates spiritual laws that respond to certainty and ignore wishy-washy, half-hearted attempts. You cannot serve two masters, Jesus taught, and you cannot pursue wealth while simultaneously sabotaging yourself with fear, doubt, and indecision. You must choose your focus, commit completely, and refuse to let fear dictate your actions, regardless of how loudly it screams. There's a concept in biblical teaching that gets overlooked constantly, yet it holds one of the most powerful keys to financial transformation you'll ever encounter. It's the principle of stewardship, the understanding that everything you have, including your ability to earn income, isn't actually yours in any permanent sense, but has been entrusted to you temporarily for a specific purpose. The parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25 illustrates this perfectly. A master entrusts different amounts of money to 3 servants before going on a journey. 2 of them invest what they've been given and double it. The third buries his portion in the ground out of fear, returning only the original amount when the master returns. The 2 who multiplied their resources are praised and given even more responsibility. The one who hoarded and did nothing out of fear loses even what he had. This isn't a story about being nice or about religious morality. This is a description of how the universe actually distributes resources. More is given to those who prove they can handle it wisely by multiplying what they already have, and even the little that unproductive people possess eventually gets transferred to those who demonstrate better stewardship. Napoleon Hill observed this same pattern in his research, noting that money flows toward people who respect it, manage it well, and use it productively, while flowing away from those who waste it, hoard it fearfully, or treat it carelessly. Wealth isn't attracted by desperation or neediness. It's attracted by proven capacity to create value and manage resources responsibly. This is why people who win lotteries without developing the consciousness of wealth typically lose everything within a few years, while self-made millionaires who lose everything can often rebuild their fortunes relatively quickly. The difference isn't luck. It's stewardship capacity, the mental and behavioral patterns that either multiply resources or squander them. If you want to attract greater financial abundance, you must first prove yourself a good steward of whatever you currently have, no matter how small that might be. If you can't manage $2,000 responsibly, why would the universe trust you with $200,000? If you waste the time you have now, scrolling mindlessly through social media and complaining about your circumstances, why would you suddenly become productive and focused if more opportunities appeared? If you treat the people in your life carelessly, failing to honor commitments and serve with excellence, why would more valuable relationships and partnerships be drawn to you? Stewardship is about demonstrating through your current behavior that you're ready for the next level, that you have the character, discipline, and wisdom to handle greater responsibility without being corrupted or destroyed by it. And once you prove that consistently, expansion happens naturally because you've aligned yourself with the spiritual laws governing increase. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 23 instructs to know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. In modern language, this means pay attention to your financial situation with clarity and honesty. Don't avoid looking at your bank account. Don't ignore bills or pretend debts don't exist. Don't live in denial about where money is coming from and where it's going. Wealthy people track their finances carefully, not obsessively or fearfully, but with the clear-eyed awareness of someone who takes responsibility for their stewardship. They know their numbers, they understand their cash flow, they make decisions based on reality rather than wishful thinking, and this awareness itself becomes a form of power because you cannot improve what you don't measure, and you cannot manage what you refuse to acknowledge. So many people stay broke simply because they won't face the truth about their spending habits, their debt levels, their lack of income growth, and as long as they stay in denial, nothing can change, because change requires first acknowledging what currently is. But stewardship goes beyond just managing money. It extends to how you manage your time, your energy, your relationships, your health, your talents, and your opportunities. Everything you've been given is a resource meant to be multiplied, not wasted or buried out of fear. The hours in your day are resources. Are you investing them in activities that build your future, or squandering them on distractions that serve no purpose beyond temporary escape from boredom? Your physical energy is a resource. Are you maintaining your body with proper rest, nutrition, and exercise so you have the vitality to pursue your goals vigorously? Or are you depleting yourself with poor habits that leave you exhausted and unable to perform at high levels? Your mental capacity is a resource. Are you feeding your mind with knowledge, wisdom, and inspiring content that expands your thinking? Or are you filling it with negativity, gossip, and mindless entertainment that shrinks your vision? Every choice you make either demonstrates good stewardship or poor stewardship, and the cumulative effect of those choices over months and years determines whether you're positioned for increase or decline. Napoleon Hill emphasized that successful people develop what he called controlled attention, the ability to focus their mental and physical resources on their definite major purpose without being distracted by every shiny object or temporary pleasure that crosses their path. This is stewardship of attention, and in the modern world where distractions are engineered scientifically to capture and hold your focus for corporate profit, this might be the most valuable form of stewardship you can practice. Every notification you respond to, every video you watch, every rabbit hole you go down on the internet is time and mental energy that you're stewarding either toward your goals or away from them. There's no neutral ground. You're either building or wasting, progressing or regressing, and the daily micro-choices about where you direct your attention compound into either prosperity or poverty, depending on their cumulative direction. The beautiful thing about stewardship is that you can start practicing it right now with whatever you currently have. You don't need to wait until you have more money, more time, more resources. You start where you are, managing what you have with excellence, and as you prove faithful in small things, larger things are naturally entrusted to you. Luke chapter 16 verse 10 makes this clear when it says, "Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and whoever is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much." Your current circumstances are your training ground for future abundance, and how you handle today determines what you're qualified to handle tomorrow. If you're sloppy, careless, and irresponsible now, more resources would only amplify those problems. But if you're diligent, careful, and responsible with the little you have, You're developing the very capacity that will allow you to manage much more without being overwhelmed or corrupted by it. This is the pathway to sustainable wealth, not through schemes or shortcuts or sudden windfalls, but through demonstrated stewardship that qualifies you for greater and greater levels of responsibility and reward. One of the most revolutionary concepts you'll ever encounter regarding wealth is this simple truth: prosperity is a mindset long before it becomes a bank balance. Most people approach financial growth completely backward. They think that once they have money, then they'll think and act like wealthy people. But the reality is exactly opposite. You must first develop the consciousness of abundance, the mental patterns and beliefs of prosperity, and then the external manifestation follows as a natural consequence. This is what Proverbs chapter 23 verse 7 means when it says, as a person thinks in their heart, so they are. You don't think prosperity thoughts because you're rich. You become rich because you've learned to think prosperity thoughts consistently, regardless of your current circumstances. Your external world is always a reflection with a slight time delay of your internal world, and the time delay is what confuses people into thinking their thoughts don't matter, or that changing their thinking won't change their reality. Napoleon Hill documented extensively how every person he studied who achieved great wealth did so by first seeing themselves as wealthy in their imagination long before physical evidence supported that vision. They used what Hill called creative visualization, spending time each day mentally living in the reality they desired to create, feeling the emotions they would feel, seeing the scenes they would see, experiencing in their mind what hadn't yet manifested in their world. This isn't daydreaming or fantasy. This is deliberate mental rehearsal that programs your subconscious mind to accept the new reality as true, and then automatically guides your behavior, perceptions, and decisions in alignment with that accepted truth, until physical reality has no choice but to conform. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and an actual experience, which means you can literally reprogram your entire belief system about what's possible for you by consistently feeding it mental images of the life you're determined to create. The Bible speaks to this in multiple passages, perhaps most clearly in Mark chapter 11, verses 23 through 24, where Jesus teaches that whoever says to this mountain, "Be removed and cast into the sea," and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Therefore, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Notice the sequence here. You must believe you have received before you actually receive it physically. You must accept in your consciousness that the thing is already yours, already done, already accomplished, and maintain that belief until the physical manifestation catches up with your mental reality. This is how faith functions, not as hoping or wishing or wanting, but as knowing with absolute certainty that what you've claimed in the spiritual realm must eventually manifest in the physical realm, because spiritual reality is the creative force that shapes physical reality, not the other way around. This is where most people fail catastrophically. They pray for abundance or affirm prosperity or visualize wealth, but in their hearts, they don't actually believe it's possible for them. They're going through motions, trying techniques, hoping something magical will happen, but underneath the surface, their core beliefs remain unchanged. They still see themselves as limited, unworthy, unlucky, or somehow different from the people who actually succeed. And because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, as Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 explains, their lack of genuine faith ensures that nothing manifests. They're sending mixed signals to the universe, declaring abundance with their words, while broadcasting scarcity with their beliefs. And the universe responds to beliefs, not words. It gives you what you actually expect deep down, not what you claim to want on the surface. This is why transformation must happen at the level of core beliefs, not just surface behaviors or temporary positive thinking. So how do you change beliefs that have been with you for decades, that feel as real and permanent as your own bones? You do it the same way those beliefs were formed in the first place, through repetition and emotional intensity. Your current beliefs about money were installed by hearing certain messages repeatedly from parents, teachers, society, and your own experiences. You heard that money doesn't grow on trees. You heard that rich people are greedy, or that you have to work hard for every dollar, or that there's never enough, or that people like you don't get to be wealthy. You heard these messages hundreds or thousands of times, and each repetition strengthened the neural pathways in your brain until those thoughts became automatic, unconscious, accepted as truth without question. But if beliefs were installed through repetition, they can be uninstalled and replaced through counter-repetition of more empowering truths spoken with emotional conviction until those new truths become your automatic programming instead. This is why Napoleon Hill emphasized the importance of written affirmations reviewed daily with feeling and visualization. He recommended writing a clear statement of exactly how much money you intend to accumulate, by what date, what service or value you'll provide in return, and reading this statement aloud twice daily while visualizing yourself already in possession of the money. This practice isn't about tricking the universe. It's about deliberately reprogramming your subconscious mind to accept a new identity, a new normal, a new set of expectations about what's possible and probable for you. And when your subconscious accepts this new programming, it automatically begins adjusting your behavior, your perception of opportunities, your energy levels, your decision-making patterns, and your willingness to take action, all of which combine to move you toward the reality you've claimed as yours in consciousness. The process requires patience because your subconscious mind is protective of its existing programming and will resist change at first. You'll feel foolish speaking affirmations that contradict your current reality. You'll have doubts and negative thoughts that try to convince you this isn't working. Your circumstances might even seem to get worse temporarily as old patterns play out their momentum. But if you persist, if you refuse to let temporary appearances discourage you, if you maintain your vision with unwavering faith despite what your physical senses report, you'll eventually reach a tipping point where the new beliefs become stronger than the old ones and everything shifts. This is the valley of the shadow that Psalm 23 speaks about, the uncomfortable transition period between who you were and who you're becoming, and the only way through it is through it, staying faithful to your vision until the breakthrough manifests. There's a principle in Scripture that most people have heard but few truly understand in its practical application to wealth creation. It's the principle of faith without works being dead, spoken plainly in James chapter 2, verse 26. Faith is absolutely essential for prosperity. You must believe in the possibility of abundance. You must maintain a consciousness of expectation and divine provision. But faith alone, disconnected from corresponding action, produces nothing. It's the combination of unwavering belief plus consistent action aligned with that belief that creates unstoppable momentum toward your goals. You cannot simply sit in meditation visualizing wealth while taking no practical steps to create value, serve others, or position yourself for opportunities. The universe responds to movement, to action, to people who demonstrate through their behavior that they're serious about their stated intentions, rather than just fantasizing about results while doing nothing different than they've always done. Napoleon Hill found that every successful person he studied possessed what he called the habit of taking initiative without being told what to do. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't need someone to give them step-by-step instructions. They didn't sit around hoping someone would discover them or hand them an opportunity. They looked at what they wanted to accomplish, figured out what needed to be done, and started doing it even if they didn't have complete information or perfect conditions. They understood that clarity comes through action, not before action, and that waiting until you feel ready or until everything is perfect is just a sophisticated form of procrastination that keeps you stuck forever. The path becomes clear as you walk it, not before you take the first step, and if you wait for total certainty before moving, you'll wait your entire life, while others with less knowledge but more courage pass you by and claim the rewards you were too afraid to pursue. This is why Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 4 offers such practical wisdom when it says, "Whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." In other words, if you wait for perfect conditions before taking action, you'll never take action because perfect conditions never exist. There will always be reasons to wait, excuses to delay, fears to justify inaction. The economy isn't right. You don't have enough capital. You need more education. You're too young or too old. You don't have the right connections. The market is saturated. It's the wrong time of year. On and on the excuses flow, and every one of them is valid in some sense, which makes them dangerously seductive. But successful people don't wait for ideal conditions. They create progress despite imperfect conditions, learning and adjusting as they go, understanding that taking action with 80% information is better than taking no action with 100% information, because the additional 20% can only be learned through experience anyway. Think about Abraham, called by God to leave his homeland and go to a place he'd never seen, not knowing where he was going but trusting the voice that called him. Think about Moses, terrified of public speaking, arguing with God about his inadequacy, yet stepping forward to lead an entire nation out of slavery. Think about David, a teenage shepherd boy facing a trained warrior giant that had terrified an entire army, armed with nothing but a sling and absolute faith that God would deliver victory. These weren't people who had everything figured out. They were people who heard a call, believed it was possible, and took the next step available to them despite fear, despite lack of resources, despite what everyone around them said was impossible. And their action, combined with their faith, released supernatural provision and power that wasn't accessible until they moved first. The universe doesn't reward those who wait for guarantees. It rewards those who step forward in faith and prove through their action that they're serious about their vision. Napoleon Hill called this applied faith, faith that's been put into motion through concrete action steps aligned with your goals. You can't just have faith that money will appear. You must have faith in your ability to create value, serve others, learn necessary skills, overcome obstacles, and persist until you succeed. And then you must act on that faith daily by doing things that move you toward your vision. You study, you network, you create, you launch, you test, you improve, you serve, you follow up, you stay consistent. And as you do these things with faith, that they will eventually produce the results you're after, you activate spiritual laws that begin working on your behalf in ways you cannot see or control, but that are absolutely real and powerful. Doors open that you didn't know existed. People appear with resources or information you needed. Circumstances align in your favor, not randomly, not by chance, but because you've cooperated with the principle that faith plus action equals manifestation. But here's what most people miss. The action required isn't always comfortable or convenient. It often requires you to do things you've never done before, things that scare you or challenge you or push you beyond your current capabilities. It might require you to have difficult conversations, make investments that feel risky, commit to projects that demand more from you than you've ever given before, work longer hours than you're used to working, learn skills that don't come naturally. Face rejection repeatedly until you find acceptance. This is where most people's faith fails. They're willing to believe in abundance as long as the path to it is easy and comfortable. But the moment they're called to step out of their comfort zone, to risk something, to be uncomfortable for an extended period, they retreat back to what's familiar and then wonder why their prayers aren't answered and their affirmations don't work. The answer is simple. They had faith enough to wish, but not faith enough to work. They wanted the reward without the requirement, the harvest without the planting and tending and weeding and watering that comes between seed and fruit. The book of Philippians chapter 2 verse 13 offers a beautiful insight into how this partnership between divine power and human action works. It says God is working in you, giving you the desire and power to do what pleases Him. Notice both elements. God provides the desire, the vision, the inner prompting towards something greater. But you provide the action, the follow-through, the persistent effort that transforms desire into reality. It's a co-creative process. You don't do it alone through pure human effort, trying to force things to happen through willpower. But neither does God do it for you while you sit passively waiting for miracles to drop from the sky. You partner with divine intelligence, moving forward in faith while trusting that as you take each step, the next step will be revealed, and the resources required will appear at exactly the right moment. Not necessarily when you want them, but always when you need them if you stay faithful to the process. We're approaching the culmination of everything we've explored together, and if you've stayed with me this far, something profound has already shifted inside you, whether you consciously recognize it yet or not. You've been exposed to principles that have the power to completely transform your financial reality, not because they're new or trendy or because I invented them, but because they're ancient truths that have worked for every person who's ever applied them with genuine faith and consistent action. The question now isn't whether these principles work. History has proven they do. The question is, whether you will work them. Will you take what you've learned and actually implement it in your daily life? Or will you let this become just another inspiring message that made you feel good temporarily but changed nothing permanently because you never translated knowledge into behavior? Napoleon Hill concluded his masterwork by stating that the starting point of all achievement is desire, but not just casual preference or vague wishing. He meant burning desire, an obsession with your goal so intense that failure isn't an option you're willing to consider, a commitment so complete that you'll persist through any obstacle until you succeed or die trying. This isn't exaggeration. This is the level of commitment required for extraordinary achievement. And the Bible confirms this when Jesus teaches in Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 8, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened." But notice the verbs. They're action words. Ask, seek, knock, not wish, not hope, not wait passively. Active engagement with your desired outcome. Persistent pursuit despite closed doors and delayed answers. Unwavering faith that keeps moving forward even when nothing seems to be happening yet. The life you want, the prosperity you desire, the freedom and abundance you dream about, all of it already exists in potential form waiting for you to claim it through the combination of right thinking and right action sustained over time. You don't have to invent anything new. You don't have to be extraordinarily talented or connected or lucky. You simply have to align yourself with principles that have existed since before you were born and will continue existing after you're gone. Universal laws that govern how prosperity flows and who receives it and under what conditions. Everything we've discussed, from the power of thought to the necessity of giving to the importance of stewardship to the requirement of action, all of it works together as a complete system that produces predictable results when applied correctly. This isn't theory. This isn't philosophy. This is practical spiritual science that you can test in your own life starting today if you have the courage to try. But I need to be honest with you about something. Knowing these principles changes nothing if you don't apply them. You could have all the knowledge in the world, understand every scripture reference, memorize every Napoleon Hill quote, and still remain broke if you don't translate that knowledge into daily habits and behaviors that actually move you toward your goals. This is the gap where most people fail. They collect information endlessly, attend seminars, read books, watch videos, always learning but never doing, perpetually preparing but never launching, and years go by while they stay stuck in the same financial situation, wondering why nothing changes. The answer is simple. Information without implementation is just entertainment, and entertainment doesn't pay bills or build wealth or create freedom. Only action does that. Only consistent daily action aligned with proven principles produces transformation. And if you're not willing to do things differently than you've been doing them, you cannot expect different results no matter how much you know or how inspired you feel. So here's my challenge to you, and I'm making it simple and specific so there's no confusion about what to do next. First, within the next 24 hours, write down your definite financial goal with absolute clarity. How much money do you intend to have 1 year from today? What date specifically? What value will you provide to the world in exchange for this money? Write it as a statement of fact, not a wish. I will have X dollars by this date by providing this service or value. Second, read that statement aloud twice every day, once when you wake up and once before you sleep, visualizing yourself already in possession of that amount while feeling the emotions you would feel. Do this without fail for 12 straight months and watch what happens. Third, identify one action you can take today that moves you even one small step toward that goal and take it before the day ends. Then tomorrow, take another step, and the next day, another. Build momentum through consistency, understanding that small actions repeated daily compound into massive results over time, just as surely as small drops of water eventually fill an ocean. Fourth, protect your mind ruthlessly from negative influences, fear-based media, toxic people, and limiting beliefs. Curate what you read, watch, and listen to so that you're feeding your consciousness with content that strengthens your faith and expands your vision rather than reinforcing doubts and limitations. Fifth, practice generosity daily by giving something of value to someone else, whether that's money, time, knowledge, encouragement, or service. understanding that giving activates the law of circulation and positions you to receive more because you've demonstrated that you're a channel through which abundance flows rather than a dam where it gets stuck. And sixth, join a community of people who are also committed to growth, prosperity, and positive transformation, because you cannot maintain a prosperity consciousness while surrounded exclusively by poverty consciousness, and the people you associate with will either lift you higher or pull you lower, but they will never leave you unchanged. These 6 actions, implemented consistently, will produce more transformation in your financial life over the next year than everything you've done in the past 5 years combined. Not because they're complicated or secret, but because they work with spiritual laws rather than against them, and spiritual laws always produce results when applied correctly. The entire Bible could be summarized as a manual for how to align yourself with God's principles for abundant living, and Napoleon Hill's entire life work was dedicated to translating those principles into practical application that anyone could use regardless of religious background. You now have access to both perspectives, sacred and secular, ancient wisdom and modern research, all pointing to the same truths about how prosperity actually works. The only question remaining is what you'll do with this knowledge. Will it transform you or merely inform you? Will it become the catalyst for your breakthrough or just another forgotten video you once watched? That choice is yours alone, and nobody can make it for you. I want to close with one final passage that captures everything we've discussed. It's from the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 8. "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success." Notice the sequence. Keep the principles constantly before your mind through meditation and repetition. Be careful to act according to what you've learned. Then, and only then, you will make your way prosperous. Not hoping prosperity happens to you, but actively making your way prosperous through alignment with divine principles and consistent action. This is your invitation to step into the abundant life that's been waiting for you, to claim the prosperity that exists in potential until you activate it through faith and works, to become the person you were created to be, rather than remaining the limited version of yourself that fear and ignorance have kept you as until now. Your future begins the moment you decide it does. Your transformation starts the instant you commit to it fully. Your prosperity is already prepared and waiting for you to rise up and claim it. So the only question left is, will you? Will you take these truths and apply them with everything you have? Will you persist when things get difficult? Will you keep faith when results delay? Will you become the person who proves that these principles work because you worked them faithfully until breakthrough came? I believe you will, because something brought you here to this moment, to these words, to this decision point, and I don't think that was random chance. I think you're being called to something greater than you've experienced so far, and everything you've needed to begin that journey has just been placed in your hands. Now walk forward in faith, take action with courage, and watch as the universe conspires to reward your commitment with abundance beyond what you can currently imagine. Your season of prosperity is here, if you'll just reach out and take hold of it. God bless you on this journey. Now go and prosper.